You know that feeling when the whole house goes dark, click, the breaker trips, adults tense up, voices sharpen, and you don't panic. You go quiet, you move. Cold air settles in as you feel your way down the hall. Your hand finds the flashlight like it's memorized the route. Then the fridge comes back that low, steady hum, and your nervous system does the same thing, stabilize. If you were raised in the 1970s and chaos doesn't scare you, that's not you being cold. It's training. You grew up in 3 rooms. The storm room where figure it out was normal. The quiet room where a closed door meant space, not danger. The waiting room, where a layaway slip paper rough on your thumb, meant you'd already paid, and now you just waited. And here's the part people miss. Because you don't collapse, they lean on you. Then they call you detached. Hold on, let me name it. The brain's background mode, default mode network. Dopamine surprise meter, reward prediction error. So, when they call you cold, what they're really seeing is stability. They see you pause before you reply. They see you go quiet when the room gets loud. They see you stop reacting on cue and they label it distant, detached, slow, stubborn. But what if it isn't your personality being difficult? What if it's your nervous system being competent? Because your body learned something early. The world doesn't always get calmer first, so you get calmer first. That's what allostasis is, your system staying balanced inside a changing environment. And yes, it's a gift. It keeps the lights on. But it also explains why you can look fine on the outside, while your inside has been running a generator for decades. A generator isn't pretty. It's not quiet. But when the whole neighborhood goes dark, it's the reason one room still glows. What people call distance is sometimes self-regulation. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to walk down that hallway again and open 3 doors you've been carrying in your body since childhood. Chaos, silence, waiting. And I'm not just going to tell you the superpower version, because each one comes with a cost. Chaos made you steady, but it also made people assume you don't need help. Silence made you deep, but it also taught you to disappear without anyone noticing. Waiting made you disciplined, but it also trained you to tolerate things that should have changed sooner. That's the loop we're closing today. Why you're exhausted. Even when you've done everything right, you're not wrong. You just adapted too well. Stressor controllability, when stress is solvable versus helpless. Now, let's step into the first room. Not fast, just honest. So first, the storm room. Not drama, not your personality, not you liking intensity. Just the climate you were raised in. Picture a winter night. The heater quits. The vents stop breathing. A thin smell of dust, old warmth hangs in the air. You're watching the adults, not the thermostat. Because that's what kids do in uncertain decades. They learn to read faces, the way other kids learn to read maps. A radio is on somewhere low volume, but it still lands. A short update. Something about gas, something about lines, something about shortages, and you don't fully understand the economics. You just feel the room tighten. That's the part people miss when they talk about the 70s, like it was just fashion and fun. There was a background tremor. Energy shocks, inflation, institutions losing their shine. Even if you couldn't name it, your nervous system could detect it. So you adapted. Not by becoming fearless, by becoming functional. You learn to scan for what's stable, what's not, what can be fixed, what can't. You learn to keep your breathing steady, while adults talked in half sentences. And over time, your body got good at the thing it had to do most often: hold equilibrium inside motion. That has a name in physiology: allostasis, staying balanced by changing with the environment. And the cost, when you have to do it too much, too long, has a name too: allostatic load. The wear and tear of being the calm one repeatedly. So no, you don't love chaos. You just grew up in weather that shifted without warning. And your nervous system learned to stop asking the sky for permission. And when the outside got loud, you learned a second skill: how to be still inside it. The quiet room doesn't look like much. It's a kitchen, late afternoon light, thin and pale, A wall clock keeps time like it's the only job that matters. Tick, tick, tick. You sit at the table with nothing performing for you. No feed, no scroll, no tiny emergencies chiming for your attention. Just the ordinary hum of a house being a house. And yes, sometimes that quiet was lonely. Sometimes it was too much space for a kid. But something else is also true. Quiet used to be normal. You weren't constantly being pulled out of yourself. You weren't trained to treat boredom like a medical event. You had long stretches where your mind did what minds do when nobody's shaking the cage. It wandered. It connected dots. It replayed conversations. It made stories out of scraps. That's not you being antisocial. That's you learning to live in your own head without panicking. And the moment that trained it was tiny, almost ceremonial. You come home, you close the door. You drop your keys into a metal tray and the sound rings out small, clean, final. Clink. In that sound, there's a whole era. A whole assumption. The world doesn't need to narrate itself every second for you to survive it. There's a reason this shows up in data about kids in that broad Gen X Xennial overlap. How many hours after school were spent without an adult right there in the room? It wasn't every household. It wasn't every kid. But it was enough of a pattern that it got measured and discussed in national surveys and reports in the early 80s. And here's the soft cost we don't say out loud. If you got good at being alone, you might have gotten bad at asking for company. You can handle quiet so well that people assume you prefer being left. Key line: you don't fear silence, you were raised with it. And sometimes, you were raised by it. Somatic break, just for a second. You set the keys down, your shoulders drop without permission, and quiet doesn't need a defense. Now the waiting room. Not the modern kind where you're waiting, but your brain is still sprinting because your phone keeps handing you candy. The old kind. You stand at a department store counter with your parent. A clerk flips through a small booklet. There's a layaway, slip-thin paper, slightly rough at the edge. You've already paid something. Not all of it, but enough that it's real. And now the rule is simple. You don't get it yet. You get it later. No shame, no motivational speech, just the structure of the world. And you learned that structure everywhere. You clipped a coupon RRIP and it felt like effort. You watched hands count bills, careful and quiet, like time itself was a currency. You wrote an order form, licked a stamp, and dropped it into a mailbox with that hollow metal echo. Thunk. Then nothing happened. Not immediately. Not for hours. Not for days. And your nervous system learned something that's rare now. Delay isn't danger. Delay isn't rejection. Delay is just delay. So when people today call you slow or unbothered or not ambitious enough, they might be missing the real mechanism. You weren't trained to treat every desire like a siren. You weren't trained to believe every want deserves an instant answer. You were trained for lag. And that matters because modern systems are built to erase lag. And when lag disappears, the brain starts expecting the world to deliver on demand. There's a reason a lot of old willpower stories got complicated when researchers dug deeper, like the famous marshmallow experiments. Later analyses suggested outcomes are tangled up with environment, reliability, and trust in the world, not just a child's moral fiber. Which is just another way of saying your patience isn't virtue, it's context. And here's the cliffhanger that takes us into the next chapter. When you grew up inside delay, your dopamine system didn't get trained on constant immediate hits. But the algorithm, years later, learned exactly how to manufacture them. So no, waiting didn't make you weak. Waiting made you durable. And now, let's talk about what that durability is, biologically. Okay, now we're inside the wiring. Picture a small crisis. Not cinematic, just real life. A pipe under the sink starts leaking. Cold water spreads across the cabinet floor. Someone freezes. Someone swears. Someone goes, "Oh my God," and you don't perform panic. You shut off the valve. You grab a towel. You get on your knees. You do the next right thing, then the next. And that's the moment people misread. They look at your face flat, focused, and they decide you don't care. But what's actually happening is simpler and kinder. Your brain learned to sort stress into two categories, solvable and unsolvable. When stress is solvable, when there's some lever you can pull, your system goes into control-seeking mode. Not because you're emotionless, because control is how the body lowers threat. So your calm isn't a lack of feeling, it's a sequence. Stabilize the system first, feel later. And here's the cost we don't talk about enough. Because you're good in emergencies, you become the designated adult. Even when you're not the oldest in the room, people hand you the mess and call it leadership. They call you when something breaks. They don't call you to ask if you're tired. You're not numb. You're prioritizing system stability before expression. And you don't have to look panicked to prove you care. Now, the quiet room explained from the inside. You sit by a window. No music. No background talk show. Just the house doing what houses do. A soft tap somewhere as it cools. A tiny shift in the wood. The light on the wall moving almost imperceptibly. And your mind starts moving. Not in a frantic way. In a stitching way. This is your brain's background mode coming online. The part that gets louder when the world finally stops grabbing your sleeve every 3 seconds. It's the system that helps you replay, reframe, and make meaning. It's the part of you that takes scattered moments and tries to turn them into a story you can live with. So when other people say, "I can't be alone with my thoughts," you don't judge them. You understand what they're describing. A nervous system trained on constant stimulation suddenly being asked to sit in an empty room with itself. You had practice. You didn't have infinite dopamine snacks available on demand, so your brain learned how to generate its own content. And yes, this can make you deep, but it can also make you disappear. Because if you're good at being alone, you might start believing you don't need anyone. Or worse, you might believe no one would want the real version of you anyway. So you process everything internally, quietly, competently, until you're exhausted from carrying your own weight in your own skull. A pencil taps the table once, twice, then stops. Right here, small permission. You're allowed to not answer immediately. Not because you don't care, because you're doing maintenance. You're not avoiding people. You're going toward depth. Now, the waiting room. Every afternoon, you check the mailbox. Not like a gambler, not like an addict. More like a person who lives by rhythm. You open it, empty. You close it. No spiral. No insult to your self-worth. Just not today. And that's a huge difference. Because your reward system doesn't just respond to pleasure. It responds to prediction. And the gap between what you expected and what you got. The surprise, the delay, the uncertainty. That's why modern feeds can hook attention so effectively. Endless, variable, maybe the next one will hit. But you grew up with built-in delay. Waiting wasn't a glitch. It was the operating environment. So your brain learned, I can want something and not collapse in the space before it arrives. And people mislabel that. They call it low ambition. They call it apathy. They call it, you don't want it badly enough. But it might be something else. Quiet discipline, a nervous system that doesn't need constant external reinforcement to stay online. And here's the shadow side, the part that turns this from pride into tenderness. If you're good at waiting, you can start waiting for things that shouldn't require waiting. An apology, a reply, a basic level of care. Someone choosing you without you having to earn it through usefulness. You can tolerate delay so well, you mistake it for love. So, let me reframe it cleanly. What they call no fire can be discipline without noise. And you don't have to run fast to be valuable. You just need to breathe in your own tempo instead of the tempo the algorithm is trying to sell you. And now, we can do the gentlest part, because understanding the wiring is one thing. Living inside it, day after day, is another. Let's make you a place to rest. And here's the part I want you to hear slowly. You're not out of place in modern life because you're broken. You feel out of place because your nervous system was built in a different climate. A climate with real storms, real quiet, real waiting. So, of course, the current world feels loud, not just in sound, in demand. Everything wants an immediate reaction, an immediate opinion, an immediate reply, an immediate version of you. And when you don't give it, people call you difficult. But you're not difficult. You're trained. You were shaped by 3 rooms and you survived them. The storm room taught you to stabilize. The quiet room taught you to integrate. The waiting room taught you to endure delay without turning it into panic. And now, here's the shift. You don't have to live in those rooms forever. You don't have to stay in survival mode just because it's familiar. You don't have to keep proving your steadiness to earn your place. In your mind, it can feel like there's still that hallway. 3 doors, and you keep walking back and forth, opening them automatically. But you're not trapped there anymore. You have a hand on the doorknob now. You get to choose what opens. You get to choose what stays closed. And maybe that's the most adult thing you were never taught to do as a kid, not just to be competent, but to be cared for. You lived through noise. So yes, quiet for you isn't a luxury. It's a right. And you don't have to prove anything to deserve it. You're allowed to drop your shoulders. Now, I want to give you 3 permissions. Not advice, not a plan. Just permission, like setting something heavy down without explaining why. First, you're allowed to stop turning everything into an emergency. Not because you don't care, but because your system can't stay on high alert forever. Some things can wait 5 minutes. Some things can wait a day. Some things don't need your nervous system at all. Second, you're allowed to be quiet without translating yourself. You're allowed to pause before you answer. You're allowed to think first. You're allowed to let silence be a complete sentence. If someone can't tolerate your quiet, that doesn't automatically mean your quiet is wrong. And third, you're allowed to wait. And you're also allowed to stop waiting. Because this is the tender trap for people like you. You can endure so much, you start enduring what you shouldn't. You can be patient with someone who is simply unavailable. You can wait for the apology that never comes. You can wait for the care that always arrives late, like it's on layaway. So hear this gently. Waiting is a skill, but so is leaving the waiting room. And if you're sitting there right now with that old familiar ache, telling yourself, it's fine, I can handle it. You can handle it. That's not the question. The question is, should you have to? You're not lazy. You're not weak. You're maintaining an operating system that's been running for a long time. So just for a moment, you don't need to do anything else. No fixing, no proving, no explaining. Just a small, quiet exhale. Now we'll land this where the channel lives. At home. You step inside, the door closes behind you. And for a second, the world is still there, sure, but it's farther away. The light is warmer in here, not brighter, warmer. Your feet find the cold tile. There's a soft click of the lock, and the house answers back with that low hum from the fridge, steady, ordinary, loyal. You don't need a screen to fill the silence. You don't need a notification to be real. You don't need to earn rest by collapsing. You get to rest while you're still standing. So, if this is the kind of space your body recognizes, you can stay here a minute. No rush, just breathe. In through the nose, out a little longer than you think you need. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. Let your hands stop gripping an invisible rail. And if you want to be here again, sometime you know where to find it. Safe from the noise. The door is closed. The lamp is warm. And you don't have to explain why that feels like oxygen.